Hello and welcome. Starfield is here, long awaited, and now we can finally get it in our hands. In this video, I'm going to show you quickly how you can actually get the best gaming experience with Starfield on the ASUS ROG Ally, what presets you need to use for handheld mode, as well as what happens when you play it into docked mode, and what mode you should use and what settings you should use for getting the best playable experience out of this game. So let's jump right in here to settings. Currently we're in handheld mode. We'll go into settings here and I'll show you what's happening. So right now I'm running in 1080p mode. That's the native resolution of this display. I've chosen the medium preset, and I'll show you in just a moment what is the difference between low and high. Ultra is simply not possible in handheld mode. You get a very poor gameplay experience. By default, VSync is on, leave it on. FSR2 is enabled, leave it enabled, since this is an AMD APU and it can fully utilize that FSR2 tech. I have turned off VRS. That is, it's a little bit more taxing on that APU than we really need, and without that the game actually looked quite visually stunning anyway, so that's not necessary. The other tweaks that I've done here is if you go into the command center by pressing this button on the left hand side of the device, make sure that you're running in either turbo mode or performance mode to get the best possible frame rates. You can have your real-time monitor on or off, but here's the other change that you really need to make, which is to make sure you apply the 30 FPS limiter to give the dynamic resolution the ability to adjust on the fly to make sure that you get a consistent and locked frame rate experience. And as you can see here, the resolution on my display is 1080p. So if we close out the command center and we'll jump back into the game here, let's enable our real-time stats. And we can see here that I'm running pretty close to 30 FPS here, 28, 29 FPS and 30 FPS. You know, it seems to be pretty, it plays pretty well. I don't have any issues with actually, juddering or skipping. Because this is a FreeSync display as well, it actually handles some of the stutteriness, and it smooths things out so you won't experience any of that. And with medium fidelity, we get a lot of the visual enjoyment of the game, as well as a pretty good 30 FPS experience. There may be the occasional dip when action gets very heavy on the screen, but thus far it's been playing very well. In addition, what you can do if you like is you can switch this down to, as I mentioned, from the performance, or excuse me, the turbo mode into a performance mode. It'll drop down into the high 20s. It may still hit 30 FPS on occasion, or mostly 30 FPS, 28 FPS right now, but you'll still have the visual fidelity of the game with the medium quality preset, while still getting a pretty decent gameplay experience and a little bit longer battery life. But of course, to get this game to really push all those visuals, you really need to run it, I believe, in turbo mode to get the full potential of the display here and the APU. So with that, it looks pretty visually stunning. However, I'll switch back into turbo mode here, and just to quickly demonstrate what happens if you switch it down to low or into high graphics mode. I would not recommend that those are the settings that you should play with. But if we go here to settings and we drop down the display mode to low, let's say if we want to favor, for example, a better frame rate, what happens is there's a significant reduction in visual quality, and everything starts to look more blocky, jaggedy edges, things are not sharp enough. I would not recommend using the low preset for playing this game, and it does not overall, if I turn off the FPS limiter here, I'll show you that it does not actually impact the overall frame rate quite as much as you would think. So it jumps up to around 38, 39 frames per second. It's still, this is not going to be, I don't think this is a good enough compromise. So I would prefer that, leaving it on, or leaving the frame limiter to 30 FPS and playing with a little bit higher fidelity graphics to get better visuals in this game, which, really is favoring the visual fidelity over the actual performance. And if I jump up into high, let's also show you this one as well. Now you're going to tax the GPU quite a bit. The game looks quite nice at this setting, but as you can see here, it struggles even at 30 watts to try and push the sufficient frame rate to make this a really nice and playable experience. You're going to get mid, perhaps low 20s for the most part, and with the FreeSync display, it is playable. It's still doable. It's not a fun experience overall, so I would recommend against it. The other thing I would suggest is if you want to just forget about it and not have anything to do with that, you can go into the settings here, and as I mentioned earlier, switch it to medium. And if you go to the presets, if you switch it to medium here, You can, if you prefer, to get a little bit additional visual fidelity because there is a little bit of breathing room on that APU. Lock it to 30 FPS, leave the variable rate shading on, and you will get a stunning display of a game at this resolution here. So 1080p native resolution on this display. The next thing we'll do here is I'll jump into dock mode and show you what that gameplay and options looks like. And finally, in dock mode, if you're plugged into a USB-C dock, I've got hooked up over here with HDMI to my capture card. So I'm running natively. Let's look at the settings here. I'm running approximately at 1080p and I'm on the medium preset for quality. I've got FSR2 is on and I'm using VSync on. You can additionally turn or optionally turn off VSync and you'll get a little bit better, but now you start to see some screen tearing, particularly on the capture card because it doesn't have the smoothing that the FreeSync built-in display has on the handheld gaming PC in the ROG Ally. So now what happens though, if we look at our performance stats, we can see here that we're getting around 33 FPS and around 24 to 25 watts, so still a very playable gameplay experience. However, because this device has been pretty buggy and it still continues to be, I have seen that turbo mode, which is what I'm operating in currently, actually jumps up occasionally to 42 to 43 watts when you're plugged into AC power and you've got it hooked up to an external display, particularly even if you're not hooked up to external display. But in this particular case, I've been kind of messing with this, rebooted a few times, tried to toggle and see what's going on, but it seems to be locked this time at 24 watts. However, if you switch it over to manual mode, which allows you to crank the dials all the way up in Armory Crate, it doesn't seem to be doing much other than ramping up the fans, which I've set to max speeds on the two little fans that are in this device. If you go to 10 watt silent mode, it really drops down the wattage and you get a pretty pitiful, gameplay experience. That's really designed for, I think, indie games or very low graphical fidelity games. Performance mode gets you most of the way there towards that 30 FPS figure. And if we look here, it's close to 29 FPS. Of course, when the wattage settles down to 15 FPS, I don't understand what ASUS has done with the BIOS here and the power levels, but this device is kind of all over the place. Nothing is still consistent. It still needs some work on the operating modes, on the command center software, as well as the Armory Crate. I've had many different things not work at many different times. It's been very frustrating even to make this video. However, the point here is if you lock it to either performance mode or 25 watt turbo mode, you should be able to get that 30 FPS lock. In addition, if you add an FPS limiter of 30 FPS and leave your gameplay settings on medium, turn off VRS to not have that extra taxing on the APU, you'll get a very nice gameplay experience in dock mode. Of course, I've got this hooked up to a 27-inch external display, so it looks very fuzzy. But if you have anything smaller, perhaps even a 24 or an older 22-inch display, you'll have a pretty nice gameplay experience. It's very smooth, very responsive with external peripherals hooked up, and quite a fun gameplay experience. So there you have it there. A few more things that obviously you can look at to tuning is, of course, to turn off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth if your dock supports Ethernet. Perhaps that may help a little bit, with your gaming performance. You may additionally look at extra cooling, perhaps a cooling pad or an extra fan to just keep the device cool, so it can continue to push that wattages up to that APU. But essentially, a 30 FPS lock at 1080p native resolution of this display, whether in handheld mode or dock mode, is totally possible. Put it onto the medium preset, turn off VRS, and basically just enjoy. So hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and please like my channel, please subscribe and share my channel across your social media if you like my content, so I can continue to grow and bring you more content and videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.